Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
And I assume most people can also see a little small picture of me on the side.
Yeah.
My name is Scott Jackson. This is my wife, Shelly. Come on in the picture. She should be helping me as there's a we're going to talk about emergency communications. Okay, so I'd like to start out imagining a scenario. The power grid has gone down. With that, the internet, cell towers, telephone, all down. Local TV and radio news are down or not providing relevant information. So you need a means of communication for two things. First, you need to establish as much intelligence about the event as possible to help you decide what you're going to do next. Are you going to bug in? Are you going to bug out? Did you get caught an hour away in a commute? So you need to get home. Need to decide if you can make it home, or do you need to go out and collect your loved ones? Depending on the scope of the emergency, changes the answer to these questions. Second thing is you need to establish communication with your people, whether that be your family or your church group or your preparedness group, whatever. So how are you going to communicate? So let's talk about some of the options that we have. Now, first off, most everybody has an AM/FM radio, but those are often limited to fairly local. So if your emergency is fairly widespread, then you may not get some external information. Maybe the local radio stations might be out with affected by the same emergency. But that's the first line of defense for sure. Other receiver-only type radios would be a shortwave radio. You've all heard of those. And I guess I didn't grab one of those out, but those are I believe those are HF. But so you'll be able to maybe hear some news externally. Maybe you'll hear from Argentina if you speak Spanish. Some people consider using a scanner. I guess I can show, well, I'll show this later, but for those of you who can see my thumbnail picture, you can see a little scanner here. And you can monitor emergency services. That's getting less and less useful in my experience because they're moving to, this does do trunking. As they move sophisticated communications, the scanners are having a hard time catching, keeping up. So anyway, I think a more productive type of communication, of course, is two-way radio, and that's where you can participate in the conversation. So you have your standard walkie-talkies. Everybody knows about that. There's a couple, I guess, services. There's family radio services, FRS and GMRS. The cheap things you get in Walmart are usually FRS, have 7 channels, only do a half a watt. And, it might reach a mile on good conditions, but it usually is just, big houses or, you campground. That's something I would recommend if you do have a walkie-talkie to make sure it has GMRS on it, because GMRS is allowed to go up to, I don't know, I think actually you can go up to 50 watts with the base station, but there is typically 2 watts, which is 4 times more powerful than the FRS radio. Now, technically, a license is required. A lot of people don't get them, but you're supposed to send in $65 and get a license. And they're only good for a few miles on average terrain. So again, you're just really local area, maybe within your block, you might be able to reach. Citizen CB radio, truckers use this. It's about 4 watts when you have it's typical, I would say. 5 miles, you can reach out 5 miles. It's limited use. I say limited use means not very many people have them, so you're just going to be able to reach whoever has CB. I don't think they're the best for reaching out. It's a good alternative, though. It really is. MERS, multi-use radio service, is a service often used in industry, not as much publicly, but I believe public can use it. You'll often see, I mean, these might be used by Dairy Queen to talk between them and the drive-through radios or something like that. They're good. They're usually about 2 watts, go about 2 to 8 miles. With a base station, you can reach maybe up to 20 miles. But the thing is, hardly anybody has them. So you might, maybe your group might get them, but you won't be able to talk to anybody else probably. So I don't think that's I don't know. I don't think that's the first alternative I would pick. I actually believe that amateur radio is what I'm going to ultimately recommend, because these allow you to reach out on the largest, strongest frequency, the strongest watt, and fairly ubiquitous. I mean, a lot of people have ham radios, so this is well known to be a solution for handling emergencies. So I'm going to talk about two types of ham bands. We have your UHF and VHF, which are basically your handheld bands. Again, with my thumbnail video, you can see here's a handheld radio. This is going to be your VHF 2-meter radio. You see it's got a short antenna, and you can hold this in your hand and you can be mobile with it. The limitation to these are that the 2-meter band is line of sight. Speaking, I mean, you can bounce around, buildings and things like that, but it's going to be limited to, I don't know, I would say 10 to 15 miles is kind of practical distances. But this does require a technician ham license with a test. So it is required that you learn enough about the radio that you're not interfering with public communication and other devices. To get into this, it's going to probably cost about $100 to $200 after you buy the different components that you need, the charger, the antenna, the replacement, things like that. We're going to go more into depth in this, so I'm going to go on to HF. HF is another alternative. It's the same amateur radio, but it's using much longer wavelengths. We're talking 10 meters to 80 meters. And when we talk about wavelengths, typically your antennas are about half or a quarter the size of your wavelength that you're trying to do. So again, with the handheld, you can get away with an antenna that's about a foot or foot to 3 feet long. But with HF, you're going to be having antennas that are on the order of 20 feet, 40 feet long. So that's a complete ballpark. They run at much higher power. You can run maybe 100 watts from a base station, and you'll have an antenna mounted, and you'll be able to reach much further. So it requires a general ham license, which requires you to understand more about antennas and the ionosphere and things like that. It'll take a little studying to be able to get that license. We'll talk a little. Oops, I went. Yeah. To get into this, it's going to cost probably on the order of $1,000. So $1,000 to $2,000, probably invest HF solution. When you get all the components together, you're going to have a tuner, you're going to have a power source, you're going to have an antenna, and all those pieces together will add up to at least $1,000. So let's see, alternatives. Satellite phones. Those are good solutions. Of course, if you're, it depends on what the scenario is, right? Because if the grid is down in a large area, well, they require infrastructure and also requires a subscription. There's a number of scenarios that would take down satellite. If you have a CME, which is a solar flare, maybe you have warfare or EMP, or maybe it's sabotage. There's many scenarios where you would not be able to have a satellite. Your satellites wouldn't be working, or your subscription would run out, and the financial industry wouldn't be there. So I don't know, it's a gamble. SneakerNet is carrying things on person or by car. You can do message drop. There's other solutions out there. There are specialized radios that will do encryption. There are devices you can attach to a cell phone, like GoTenna, that will essentially turn your cell phone into a ham radio or a walkie-talkie, even if there's no cell service. So those are just some ideas, and think through your ideas and make a plan for what your goals are and what you can accomplish. Let's just compare. I'm just going to provide this slide. I think is a helpful comparison for helping make that decision. What you need to reach, and here's how services break down on how far they will go. The red line represents 90% chance that you'll reach that far, solid red line. And these dashed yellow lines represent there's only 25% that you'll reach that distance. So that's good luck with that, is the yellow. The dashed red lines are 75% chance you'll reach that far. So at the bottom, you see the FRS will barely reach a mile. GMRS gets you out 2-3 miles. MERS, maybe 6. There's some CB radios of different types, but the top ones are base stations. These are not CB radios like you would have in your truck. Now we look at ham radio, and I think we're starting to get into an area which I think is a good solution, because you can see this is the handheld. The VHF is the 5 watt is the handheld radio. You can absolutely reach 7 miles, and then you can reach up to 20, 23 miles. That's pretty good for city level coverage. And so that's definite plan if the people you're trying to talk to are within town. Here's a base station, 20 meter, with VHF, 2 meter. You can cover a little further with a base station in your home with a designated antenna. But here's the really big jump, right? If you have a ham radio, got it hooked up to battery going 100 watts, not only can you reach 20 feet, you have a really good chance of reaching quite a distance. Here it shows 600 feet, 600 miles. Did I say feet? I meant miles on these. 600 miles, but that's just the start. I mean, people with radios here in the United States will often reach to Russia and Europe. So you can definitely reach the other sides of the United States, but we'll talk about some limitations too, just so you know what you're getting into. Radios with using small wavelengths, including 2 meter and below. These do a good job of penetrating into homes and through walls and things like that, but they don't bounce off the atmosphere. So your limitation to those are line of sight, what we're going to call it line of sight, but it's really the curvature of the earth. So, your effect, however high you are and however far you can see, that's where you can reach. And that will typically be on the order, I don't know, I think around 25, 30 miles, depending on how high you are and how tall your antennas are. So again, that's why I say city level coverage. But with ham radio, you can actually skip off the atmosphere, and that greatly extends the reach. You can skip once or twice or 3 times about off the atmosphere, back off the ground, atmosphere, ground. But in doing so, you'll have a skip zone. So there'll be a shallow where you can't reach. So you may be able to reach out to 30 miles, but you won't reach between maybe 50 and 150 miles. So there will be that dead zone. So that's something that you have within ham radio. You might have to establish a network of people who can reach each other's dead zones or something like that. And we, in various organizations, try to get ham operators in a network so we can kind of reach each other through nets. Okay, ham radio also requires communication, coordination. You can't just call someone, it rings up and they know that you call us there. You don't generally keep your ham radio on full time. It's expensive battery-wise. So you got to coordinate with your party what time or what frequency you're going to be on. So an example is, we're going to call 6:15 p.m. every second Thursday at 3.982 megahertz single sideband. And then you make a plan for what happens if someone's already using that. You know, if it's occupied, I'm going to try increments of 15 megahertz until you find a free channel. So that's kind of the idea. You've got to have a pre-established plan with your party about how, you know, when and how you're going to connect and reach each other. So I'm just going to make a statement. Don't expect to buy a ham radio, put it in a Faraday cage, and bring it out in the SHTF scenario and then expect to be able to use it. You've got to at least spend a little investment in learning how to use it and coordinating with people about how you're going to speak if a disaster were to occur. Now we're going to go talk about some other considerations. I'm thinking, I have until about 1:15, is that right? Yeah, I believe that's right. Okay. So I'm going to try to go through this quickly. Then I'm going to try to spend at least 10 minutes showing you some equipment that I have to give you some examples, since we learn by viewing. And then I'll open it for questions. So other things that we need to think about when in communications, and especially with two-way radios, are antennas. With the 2-meter radios, you've got, I wonder if I should, now okay. I won't yet because I have a hard time back and forth. So we'll show you the antennas, but they have little short, the handhelds that have little short antennas. This is not a big deal. If you look over at the right picture, you can also extend your range with an HF antenna by what's called a magnetic mount or a mag mount antenna. This is an antenna that you'd put on your car trunk or roof of your car. And then you'd hook that in, and that might hook into a mobile antenna inside your car. And that'll extend your range quite a bit for the 2-meter. So it's a good antenna for that. It does better than just a handheld device. You'll notice as these antennas, all antennas have kind of 3 pieces. They have the active line. I might be thinking of the wrong word, but this calls it a wire element on this one picture. You have your ground or your reflector, and then you have your feed line. Your feed line is basically just what connects your antenna back to your radio. So anyway, let's go to HF now. In HF, it's typical for people to have really high tower antennas. So you know, your antennas are usually tall and vertical. But a really inexpensive and popular antenna that is also portable is called an inverted V dipole. In an inverted V, you basically have a mast, and up at the top you attach the antenna, and it comes down with one leg, and that's your active line, and it fastens down to stakes with a guy rope, and then you have your other line on the other side, and that's just your ground wire. It's your reflector, and it attaches also the guide line. And then you have your feed point where you connect your antenna cable to. It's called I forgot feed line, and that just goes back to your antenna. So this you'll notice it's an inverted V, and it's a little more vertical than horizontal. And these are very good for establishing that skip and long distance communication. And you can just you can take it with you. It's just a bunch of wires. You throw it up in a tree and hook it to your radio, and you're good to go. I'll give you another alternative to think about. I live in the mountains. I am enclosed by mountains. So I can't even get out where I live. Another thing called VIS, which is near vertical incident skywave. And if you notice, this is oriented horizontally. I'm looking at, you can see the thing over on the left. It's a horizontal arrangement instead of vertical. And so this was not going to reach Russia. This is not going to reach, I'm in Utah, it's not going to reach New York. But what it will reach is it can establish a it can establish contact within, say, 200 to 300 mile radius of where you're at. So what it does is it shoots straight up. It uses a reflector on the ground, as the ground is a reflector, and it shoots straight up, and it hits the ionosphere, and it comes showering down everywhere you can see. All the sky you can see, you're going to hit that, and it's going to come showering back down. So this is a good way to get over mountains, over hills, over impediments, and over your skip zone, because you're not limited now by that 150 mile skip area. So that's an alternative to think about. I'll show you some solutions for that. I need to keep going. Power. If you're going to have this, we're talking about potentially grid down scenario. You need to be able to find, how are you going to power your radios if the AC is down? Well, you can use generators, but very typical for people to use a renewable source like solar. So consider using a solar generator or something like that. You can piece it together with solar yourself, with solar panel, charge controller, battery, inverter, or you can buy these solar panel packages. Goal Zero is a popular brand. There are many very good ones on the market that basically have a solar panel, then you have everything built in, the radio, I mean the battery and the charge controller and everything else is built, the inverter is built into the package. Okay, portability. You know, if you have this all set up in your homes, there's a lot of hams out there and they have elaborate setups, but many times they're just not portable. So what happens if you have to bug out? You leave all of your equipment behind. So I really recommend that you think about how might you do you want to bring this with you? And if so, how are you going to do that? I've shown a picture of a very common solution, which is to use a box or a container and put just the essential equipment in there. Some people make shelves and all that kind of stuff, but really, as long as you can get everything in there that you need, the antenna, your tuner, your radio, maybe some elements of the power, that will really help you be able to gather this in the time needed to leave if you do need to leave. I'm going to show you an example of a box that has it in it. It's not so nicely arranged. I'd like to mention something about EMP, because EMP is a possibility for several reasons. We don't. Solutions for what's going to be affected? Well, anything with electronic circuitry. So your radio would be destroyed if it were exposed to EMP. Your tuner, your charge controller. You know, your antenna would be all right. But so what can you do? Well, there are a few like Mylar bag solutions that you can use. I would think you would have to double layer those. But you know, I don't know what's been talked about by the other people, but you can use a galvanized trash can, but you've got to use aluminum tape to seal all the little micro holes in the handle, seams, and you've got to seal up the seam of the lid, so you don't want to be opening and closing it. A solution to that is to use a metal gasket. There are metal gaskets you can buy, put it along the inside of the trash can lid, and you can push it down, seal it good enough to be able to open and close it. And that's something that I've done. You can make an ammo can work. I think it would take me too much time to describe how to do that, because you need to do some sanding and some alternative gasket sealing. But one of the easiest ways is to put it in an old microwave. Go to DI, buy a microwave, cut off the plug so you don't have that antenna pulling that power, and put your devices inside an old microwave. I'm just going to leave it at that. And well, I can answer more questions afterwards. You might be interested in digital modes. I won't take much time to talk about that, but there are ways to do text. There are ways to pass data files through radio and use your computer as kind of part of the whole setup. Also security, and the final note here is security and privacy is maybe a concern of yours. Do you want people hearing your conversations? Do you want people to be able to find where you are using triangulation? There are various methods you might want to think about to encrypt or to use code or to, if you used NVIS, for example, they wouldn't be able to direction find you, DF you, because everything's shooting straight up and it's coming straight down. So NVIS is actually a pretty good solution to avoid being triangulated. I've just tried to expose you to some of the concepts that you need to think about as you decide on how to invest in communications. And I'm going to leave with a few recommendations. I'm not going to talk very much about specific brands unless I get specifically asked. I have some experience in some, but I'm going to say level 1, start with at least, at least local communication. Start with walkie-talkie. Recommend GMRS for that. If you want to get a shortwave radio, that's a good way to supplement that, so you can at least hear your long distances. So maybe I would say a walkie-talkie and a shortwave radio. You can buy a shortwave radio for cheap, $30, $60 probably, and you can store that and probably figure that out just as you need it. You can figure out the walkie-talkie too. Not a big investment. But level 2, if you want to reach, that'll only reach, just, we talked about that. Level 2, if you want to reach around the city, you have people that you want to reach, some of your relatives live in town, think about getting a ham radio. It's, for the lessons, I know they said there's a test, you can buy a book for, I don't know, like $30, and you can study it and get your hands. There's actually in Utah, there's a guy, Steve Whitehead, who will train you, who offers free classes in the BYU Law Building every year, several different classes. And he helps you just prepare for the test. Here's what the test is going to ask you. Let's get this stuff down, and it's a few hours, and you go and take the test the next day, and you've got it. So, wow, that's probably worth doing. If you have some way to learn, someone who will teach you, or find out some local ham radio operators in your area that might be willing to, that are doing classes, that's a good way to go. Now, the next step, if you've got a handheld radio, you're ready to go to the next step, then we talk about the base station. This is, if you really want to reach other states, you're going to need something on the order of a base station with an antenna and all that comes with it. So I do recommend that, but you might want to take this in levels or make a plan on what your abilities are going to be. So now I'm going to probably show you a few items just around the room. I'll take this off of screen share. Oh. You can see me, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is he a little screen or is he a bigger screen?
I'm full screen.
Big screen.
So,
okay.
Okay, so Shelly's gonna point this around, and I'm gonna just show a few things. So, first of all, here's an example of a scanner. I just bought a Shack. It's a trunk scanner, and press. You have to do a little bit to learn how to use it, but you can press scan, and it'll scan through the various channels, and it'll stop when it picks up something, and you can press scan again, and it'll keep going to the next thing. So that's good. What?
I'm just trying to figure out how to make you big on.
Oh, you want to see what we're seeing?
Yeah, make it easier.
Speaker view. Oh well, you're not going to see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Hopefully we're sharing the right thing then.
Anyway, we're right here.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. This is I didn't walkie-talkies. Everybody knows what a walkie-talkie looks like. This right here, can you see this? This is a handheld 2-meter radio. This is your VHF. You've got a couple antennas you can put on here. This right here is called the rubber ducky. Now we just barely broached this. There's so much we could talk about that. We just don't have the time for it. You know, repeaters, how to do simplex duplex, how to do squelch. There's a lot we can talk about, but it is mostly the radio has enough smarts that if you can just plug in the frequency and you push to talk. So that's what you got. I've got a radio here, an antenna. You can buy alternative antennas, and this will extend it, as you might be able to see, to about a foot, about a yard. So this will give me. Can you see that antenna? You can see parts of it. This will give me better reach. And so I keep that. I bought that antenna separately. So that was an Icon T90A. This is also a ham radio 2-meter. This is a much cheaper version. It's called Baofeng, and he alternative antenna for it. These things can run as cheap as $30. I bought a setup that cost about $65 because I bought it with a set that included an extra battery and the charger and a few things. So I have it over here in this bag. I just keep everything in this bag with my Baofeng antenna radio. I'll talk okay. I want to get through everything first, and then we can talk about brands. Okay. Now I'm going to do a base station. And this is one that I'm keeping in a portable box. So if Shelly, could you bring this over closer, look into the contents of my box. So we have a few things in a tray, a little microphone, a few miscellaneous items here. Here's the antenna. Here is the antenna we talked about. It has 2 legs. It's got one for the active element, one for the ground line. This is an inverted V antenna. It could also be an NVIS, depending on how you lay it out. This line right here, the feed line, that just goes between the top of your mast and back to your radio. And here we've got these are ground cables to hook between your battery and between your radio and the ground rod. Typically, when you're working with a big HF, you've got to have a ground rod that you drive into the ground because you're dealing with a lot of power, 100 watts. So this helps connect to that. This wire right here is meant to. Well, this connects from your radio to your power source, to your battery. This is extra cable. But here's the radio. I should have started with this. So here's the ICOM 706 MKIIG. It's a very good tri-band radio that will do both 2-meter. It'll do UHF, VHF, and HF. That's why it's called tri-band. But this is an HF radio. We'll do both 2 meters and HF. So there's an example of that. That goes to your power. This goes to your 2-meter antenna. This goes to your HF antenna. You'll have 2 separate antennas there. Typically, you will also want to have a tuner. This goes between your antenna and your radio. And you hook these up in the back, and you have to tune your antenna, because your antenna is going to want to have a standing wavelength on it, and it wants to be a certain size to be able to receive if you're going to a different band, 20 meter or 40 meter or 80 meter. Your tuner is going to, you press this and it's going to use a system of capacitors and what do you call them? Coils, I forgot what the word, inductors, to help you achieve the standing wavelength that you need to dial in that frequency, that band. Okay. So that's it. Also, this also showed you, of course, how to make it portable. Let me just take. It looks like I'm just gonna.
9 minutes.
Yeah. I have about 3 more minutes just to show you the antenna part of things. Okay. So antenna, really, all you're trying to do is you're trying to establish a mast. And typically, this mast will go up somewhere between 16 and 20 feet. For an inverted V. Most of these are inverted V solutions. So right here, we have a buddy pole antenna. All of these are portable. A buddy pole we'll use, you can see here maybe that you've got a tripod and then you've got a telescoping mast. Okay. That will raise up. And then you've got these guys, which are your wire legs. I just got some copper wire here, a little bit of nylon rope to establish the attachment to the ground. You've got 2 of them, your driven element and your ground. You've got your, what do you call it? Lead line. And various other things in here, like stakes and to finish out that pole. Do this on the cheap. So here is a solution that uses. Go down and cut yourself some pieces of PVC. Get 2 interlocking. What do you call these?
Connectors.
Connectors, joints, whatever they are, and just this all stacks up, and you just stick it in a tube or a sack, and you've got your mast. And couple that with the wire that we looked at, and you've got your antenna. One way to support that, if you want to have larger sections, is a golf bag. I just found something on.
DI.
Yeah, it was from DI. I probably didn't pay more than $5 for it, maybe $7, and you can stick all your pieces in there. That's a really nice way to carry an antenna and a setup. I've got a little bag on the side that has all the wire. I mean, a zipper pocket. So anyway, I think that's what I wanted to show. Maybe you might also want to consider some tools. So have a little tool bag to be able to put things together. This. What's that?
I can't tell what I'm shooting. The picture's way too small.
This is more than I need for just radio, but just have a little bag that has a few tools in it, or something that you might use for ham radio. Okay, well that's kind of what I was trying to show with the presentation, and I'm happy to try to answer questions, Michelle.
Awesome. I'm just looking. There's a lot of people interested in the BYU class. So
Okay.
people are putting their emails here for those that are interested.
Okay, cool. Now I don't know for a fact that he's still doing it, but he did it. He's been doing this for 15 years, 20 years. I'm pretty sure he's still offering that class. I believe it's Steve Whitehead. I can definitely send that information about that.
Okay, great. Can ham radio communicate with walkie-talkie?
I believe it can. I'm not 100% certain, but the ham radio bands extend to a long range of classes, including AM, FM radio, and things like that. I thought so.
If you have a way to tune your ham radio down to the frequency of the walkie-talkie handheld, then you could do it. That's a setup that most people do not have the capability of doing. I was able to tune mine, my HF all the way down to a 2 meter fairly easy, but I could not go down lower than that, which is in the walkie-talkie range.
Even, okay. Now I know that there are some radios that, like you said, can be tuned to go on the legal ranges. But that was something you'd have to look into.
Do all but the CBs require electricity to power or batteries?
Well, they will all need one or the other, right? They all need electricity. So a lot of them are powered by batteries, of course. So that there's all kinds of battery solutions, right? You've got the cell batteries. You can hook it up to your car battery. That's very common for CB. CB will just hook up to 12 volt quite often. That's a very common setup.
Okay. Will ham work if the grid is down?
Yes, ham will definitely work if the grid is down. That's one of the main courses of communication during the grid, and that's how emergency communications went during Hurricane Katrina. I mean, Kenneth can mention that too, but this is widely used as a communication means, and that's why I talked about having your own power. You need to have your off-grid power in order to use it in this situation.
You need to find out why what is the reason for the grid down. If it is an EMP and your equipment was not protected, then it's probably all junk. So you need to, it's best to store at least a single radio, if nothing more, in some type of Faraday cage. Keep that safe just in case it is an EMP that takes the grid down.
Yeah, and to continue with the idea, the only thing that would go down is the repeater infrastructure. And I didn't even bother to really talking about repeaters and the use of repeaters. Repeaters are the ability for you to talk to other radio towers that further communicate over mountains or extend the range. And we do have a repeater system, but I don't really think that should be part of a communication plan because of the power issue.
Yeah. So I have another question about EMP. Does your ham radio have to be on or have the battery attached for it to be damaged by an EMP?
Not at all. No, it really is independent of whether the power is on. It could be all boxed up and it can still be affected by the EMP.
Okay. So it comes through the antenna. I have a note that says that. Okay.
Well, it comes through any antenna. So as it's been explained to me, anything like 11, anything like 11 inches or longer, including even a base metal plate that's even smaller, can act as your antenna and draw things into and destroy your equipment. So probably a cell phone is too small ultimately to be destroyed, but a ham radio has enough metal on it. Even if the antenna was detached, I believe your ham radio would be susceptible. Your base station, I think probably this would be okay. Your little handhelds, if you separated the antenna. But even for safety, Kenneth, you can weigh in on that. Let me show you that. I mean, this is a good time to show you something. I've made these little pouches out of copper mesh. I just took off a wire and I sewed. Oh, yeah, they can see this, right? Okay.
Back it up so we can see it better.
Okay, it's just about a foot by a foot, and it's some copper mesh. And I took a wire off the edge and sewed around the edge. Actually had one of my kids do that for $5 or something like that. And then I put in a Ziploc bag in here just to insulate the equipment so it doesn't touch the. And I put in my handheld radios, and I put in my scanner, and I keep those in. And then when I want to close it up, I just crimp this end down and fold it down several times. And that does, in my testing, it does a pretty good job of keeping. And since this is not very susceptible in the first place, I think this is sufficient for a radio of this size. I would be concerned about a base station. I think it would read. What do you think, Kenneth?
Yeah, it would. Anything that can act as a receiver, as you mentioned, about 12 inches by 12 inches of metal, which is basically your car, and anything else. And it also includes the entire grid system. So anything attached to that as well. But as far as a ham radio or any other kind of radio that is normally not attached to a grid, it depends on how much metal there is in that unit that will act as a receiver. Now, all of your radios actually have a receiver or an antenna attached to them, which even though they may be small, they still can act as a bit big enough to receive a EMP signal into it. So as Scott already mentioned, just removing the exterior antenna from your radios and storing it that way is going to help protect them a whole lot better. Because most of them, again, they're probably too small by themselves to act as a receiver, but you put an antenna on top of it, then they would be.
Okay, we have a lot of questions, but I think that most everything we're going to just do in a document, because a lot of them could be combined into single questions, I think. So thank you all. Thank you, Scott. That was awesome. And
let me mention one more thing. Can I?
Yep.
Okay, so Shelley found the Steve Whitehead's information on the class. His email is N as in Nancy, V as in Victor, 7, V as in Victor. So NV7V at ucares.org. That's UCARES.org. He also has the phone number. Well, anyway, I'll send that out, but that was just I'll get you started. That's it for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for hanging on with us. There was just a lot of information, and I've gotten a lot of good comments on the chat saying, if you have our handouts, our PowerPoints, you're going to be able to do a lot with that. And that's what we really hoped for, is that you would be able to do a lot with a lot that we gave you. And we know that this is a comprehensive course. We could have a full day or more course on every single one of these topics. But we just really wanted to give you a touch, an idea of what's possible, idea of what's needed, and give you some resources and some places to start, and hopefully some action items and things you can take away from today and say, all right, this is what I'm going to work on. I have my list right over here. And I've been unfortunately on Amazon during this, ordering some things while we've been going, a few more books because I have an addiction, but that's just kind of how it goes. And everybody learns from each other. And so thank you so much to all the speakers who've taken time to prepare and present and share these things. And you will all be receiving an email that has the video, that has the recordings of what we've done today, as well as the handouts. And I know that there's been some other information requested through the chat. It's Thanksgiving, so give me a week or so to get all the chat questions answered back to you. And we will get that all to you to hopefully continue on in your preparedness journey. So thank you so much for joining us. And we are just grateful that we've been able to share these things to help you be prepared. Watch for more communication. I'm sure we'll have more as far as other things that come up. I'm going to be sending a survey asking, what do you want to know? What things do you want to know more about? What things did we not even talk about? What things would you like more in-depth classes on? And we'll see what we can do to provide that for you. So thank you all, and have a fabulous Thanksgiving holiday next week. I know that we're all very grateful for you, and be safe, keep safe during this crazy world we live in, and we'll all get prepared together. So thank you all.